Benefactor underwriting for this broadcast has been provided by a grant from Republic Bank. The power of red is back. Major underwriting support for this broadcast has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, Marks Paneth. Additional underwriting support has been provided by grants from AmTrust Title, Bank of America, Capital One Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, the One Stop Property Group, and these friends. Boy, some people never really want to get involved with the military, but they spend a number of years in the military. They become the rear admiral to the military when they retire with 2 stars, okay? Then they get involved with the Congress, not only the Congress, to the Supreme Court. Who's the physician in charge taking care of the Supreme Court and the Congress? The same man that we're talking about today, the man who also is a professor at NYU School of Medicine and also at the Weill Cornell Medical School. And then he's a great squash player. I have the famous Robert Krasner. Thanks for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much, Michael.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the family, okay, coming over to America, and then we'll talk about your mom and your dad.
Well, the semi-apocryphal story is that my grandfather, when he was a teenager, came over from Austria to Castle Gardens. This was before Ellis Island was built. And he got off the boat. The first people that greeted him as he got off the boat were physicians. And they looked in his eyes for trachoma and they checked him for tuberculosis. And he supposedly said, this would be a great place to be a doctor. They bring you patients daily by the boatload. And so he ended up going to Bellevue Medical School, NYU Bellevue Medical School, graduated in 1909, and then went on to practice, moved to New Jersey and practiced there. Unfortunately, I never knew him. He died long before I was born. And that was the way the tradition started.
So let's go to the next generation of the family, your dad and your mom. Tell me a little bit about them.
My parents were both born in Newark, New Jersey, went to the famous Newark, New Jersey high schools. My mother went to college in Newark at what was then New Jersey College for Women, now Rutgers. She got her undergraduate degrees in teaching and got a master's in French and in mathematics. And my father, who was the first to go to college in his family, my mother's mother had gone to college. So there was a strong element there of education. And my father went to college at Rutgers and then went down to dental school in Maryland.
How'd your parents meet?
High school or elementary school, probably. They knew each other since they were in probably elementary school. And then they went to Weequahic High School together.
Okay, that was the famous Weequahic High School that many people I know.
Right.
There. But so you were born in Newark, right? Or
I was born at the Newark Beth Israel Hospital, which takes part in a story later in that my grandfather was one of the founders of the hospital. And years later, when I was probably 14 or so, my uncle, who was also a physician, that is my mother's sister's husband, said, well, let's go to the movies one day. He came to pick me up in New Jersey. We had moved to Verona, and I was there in probably a polo shirt and chinos. And my uncle said to me, well, we've got to stop at the hospital on the way. And I said, okay, that'd be great. I really find that interesting. He said, but you got to put on a jacket and tie. I said, what? He said, your grandfather was one of the founders of that hospital. Your father and my uncle, who was picking me up, have been members there for a long, long time. And no member of our family goes to the hospital without wearing a jacket and tie.
So it sounds like it was predestined, even if you didn't want to become a physician, correct?
It was. I also had a cousin that I used to emulate, who was about 4 or 5 years ahead of me in school. And he had gone to medical school. My great uncle was in the Cornell class of 1900. And so, yes, there was a strong family connection with medicine, no doubt about it.
So let's talk about high school, because high school's before you go to Pennsylvania to school. Talk to me about high school.
I grew up basically in Verona, which is around Montclair and Caldwell and the Oranges. It's a small town. And I had several odd jobs. The first job I ever had was to be a coat check boy. Verona, which I said was sort of suburban, and there were 2 resorts. I use the term loosely. I guess in those days it was important. And people who didn't want to go all the way to the Catskills would go to the Goldman or the Greens Hotel, which were in West Orange. And I could walk through my backyard through about a 1/4 mile of woods to these hotels. And I used to work weddings and bar mitzvahs and other events in the coat check room, picking up tips of 25 cents, 50 cents when I was lucky, and really lucky, $1. That was my first job. Also, my 2 other jobs were, I was a substitute teacher in New Jersey at that time. Now, this is during the periods of the riots in the 60s. There was desperate need for substitute teachers in Newark. And at the time, you didn't need a college degree to be a substitute teacher. You only needed 2 years of college. And it was the best job in the world. I got $24.50 to drive down to Newark and basically stand in front of a classroom and do what I could do to teach. Not that I was a great teacher, but I knew a little bit more than junior high school kids. And besides, they mostly wanted to ask me questions.
Now, you graduated high school at a young age, correct? You were 16?
No, I just turned 17. It was in 1964. I then entered Lafayette College, and I went through college in 3 years. So I graduated college early. There was a family tradition of being a liberal arts major, history and literature undergraduate, something like that, and then going to medical school. Because as my father and uncle and cousin used to tell me, they're not going to teach you a lot of culture in medical school. Get everything you can while you're in college.
How did you decide to go to Maryland after Lafayette?
Well, at the time, part of it was there were no accredited medical schools in New Jersey. About the only medical school in New Jersey when I graduated college in 1967 was Seton Hall, and they were on probation. So it was fairly common. My father and uncle had both one to medical school and went to dental school in Maryland. And I went down there. It was kind of interesting because I interviewed at a whole bunch of schools, and some of the Ivy League schools wouldn't even accept my application. They actually sent me back my application fee because I didn't have in their criteria enough undergraduate science to go to medical school. Finally, when I interviewed at a couple other schools, Maryland being one of them, I had a head of physiology who interviewed me, and he sort of said to me, you know, your diversity, because you're a liberal arts major, you probably know how to read and write, and you know, your grades were good enough in college, so I guess you can learn whatever we teach you, and we're going to teach you medicine. And it turned out to be really one of the best things I ever did.
Tell me the story about how you got involved with the Navy.
Well, I did have thoughts about the military, and they were, I want to stay out of this any way I can. I actually, ironically, went so far as considered conscientious objector status. I certainly didn't want to go to Vietnam. I didn't believe in the war. Going to Canada was a little bit too much. Wasn't willing to do that. At that time, the regular draft was off, and the doctor draft continued because they needed physicians to continue to take care of all the troops that were coming back from Vietnam. And there was something called the Berry Plan, which was sort of a compromise to me. They said, okay, you don't have to go on active duty now. We'll give you a couple of years to do postgraduate training. And then if we need you, we will take you on active duty at the end of a couple more years of training. So I did go up to Boston. I spent 2 years doing surgical training at Tufts New England Medical Center and Boston City Hospital, which was excellent, excellent training. And I'd kind of forgotten about the military. And I got a call one day. And as I mentioned to you, the paging operator, in those days, they still did the classic calling Dr. Krasner. And except this time she said, calling Lieutenant Krasner with a giggle. I picked up the phone, and there was someone at the other end saying, we were about to send you a letter. You are being called on active duty. This is to inform or confirm, as the case may be, the letter said, that you will be called on active duty July 1st, 1973. And that was the beginning.
So let's talk about the initial military. I mean, how did you get up to Ethiopia?
Well, one of the things I learned about the military is you can, to some degree, plan things. First thing I got was this letter that was sending me to, saying my first assignment was going to be to a shipyard in Carolina, which didn't appeal to me a whole lot. So I thought, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I made a phone call to a number that was on my letter. And I said to this Navy captain, this is Robert Krasner. You sent me this letter sending me to Carolina shipyard. I'd rather not go. And his response was silence. And I said, I'm single. I have no obligations. I'm pretty good at travel. I'm pretty good at learning languages. You must have an assignment that no one else wants overseas that I'll take. And he said, will you say that again? I'm not sure if he was recording the message. They didn't do that, I don't think, in those days. So I want an assignment no one else wants that you're having trouble finding someone to go to. He said, okay. In about 10 days, he called me back. I said, I have an assignment for you. Do you still want any assignment that no one else wants to go to? And I said, sure. He said, well, you're going to Asmara, Ethiopia. And I said to him, okay, what do we have there? And he said, I don't know. This was 1973. I didn't know at the time, but the Mideast War was pending. The overthrow of the emperor was pending. Kissinger was doing his negotiations with the Vietnamese. And we had a strategic project going in what's now Eritrea and then was Ethiopia. So the next thing I knew, I get on an airplane and I get off an airplane after a stop in Europe in Asmara, Ethiopia.
So after Ethiopia, where you spent time with the Emperor Haile Selassie, you ended up in London?
No, I was there. I was there for a year. The Mideast War, the Yom Kippur War broke out. The Israeli Defense Forces were supporting the emperor in the war with the Eritreans. And I actually was at Yom Kippur services with 9 Israelis. And we're in the middle of services on Yom Kippur, and somebody rushes in and talks to Israeli colonel next to me and says, "We're at war." Colonel turns to me and says, "Robert, we're at war." Don't forget, this is before cell phones. This is before the internet. And I turned to him, I said, "Who's we? Is Ethiopia at war? Is the United States at war? Who's at war?" He said, "The Israelis are at war." And they didn't have their own doctor. I was in charge of doing the medical care for the Israelis in Ethiopia. So he asked me to set up contingency plans. We were just across the Red Sea from the Arab countries, and we weren't far from Khartoum. So we got through that, and then the emperor was overthrown a few months later, and we got a message from Washington saying, "Turn out the lights, lock the door, and take the next plane out of the country." From there, we flew to Khartoum, and from Khartoum, we flew to Cairo, spent some time there. And then I received a phone call saying, "You still have another year of obligated service. We're opening a dispensary in La Maddalena, Sardinia. If you're still interested in a job most people don't want." And by that, I mean, there was no commissary, there was no PX, there were not necessarily quarters for American. It was really living off the economy. And it wasn't a place you wanted to go if you had a family with you, or if you didn't want to live off the economy where they didn't speak English. So I then went and spent a year in La Maddalena, Sardinia at a submarine base.
So let's move on, because there's a lot to talk about in 10 minutes left. London, other places before you get back to Washington into the States.
I wasn't board certified at that point. I'm trying to make it quick. And once again, someone who had known me in Ethiopia and had known me in Sardinia called and said to me, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "I'm probably going to go back to Boston or someplace and finish my residency." He said, "Elliot Richardson was just being rehabilitated by Gerald Ford and is being sent to the embassy in London, and we need to replace the doctor there. Would you go?" I'm 29 years old. I'm a bachelor. The pay is good. So I go and spend the next couple of years as the physician at the embassy in London. Great, great time. After that, I was ready to go back. Still, I didn't have my boards. So I was then offered a job at Bethesda Naval Hospital, where I switched from my original surgery training to internal medicine and tropical diseases. I actually had as an attending a fellow named Fauci. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was one of my attendings in tropical infectious diseases at Bethesda. I went from there to Panama, and from Panama to Indonesia, came back, and then was sent to interview as the junior doctor at Congress, which is a job that I did get. And I spent 2 years as the junior doctor in the Capitol, taking care of the members of Congress and the Supreme Court.
Let's talk about some of the patients, because some of the patients had some life-changing effect on them, and even on this prevention in America of healthcare diseases.
Well, I have over the years set up what I call Robert's rules. And one of them relates to when my uncle said to me, you got to put on a jacket and tie to go to the hospital. And these are rules that I tell to the interns, medical students, interns, residents. They don't always agree, but they often think about them and they often come back to me. And one is, I still believe that you should look the part. And though you often go to a hospital now and see people not necessarily dressed up in a jacket and tie, my only point to them is, if you were getting on an international flight from JFK to London and you walked on the plane, it's a night flight, and you looked in the cockpit and the guy was wearing a t-shirt and jeans or cutoffs, how comfortable would you feel sleeping on that plane that night? I'm a believer in that. And one of my other big rules is, if you can't fix it, feature it. And I can tell these stories because both these patients tell the stories themselves. So they have publicly come out. One is when I discovered breast disease in Sandra Day O'Connor. And at first she said, don't let anybody know. I don't want anybody to know about this. And I said, that's impossible. I can't fix that in my little office here in the Capitol. We're going to have to go elsewhere and get the best people. I said, but under Robert's rules of, if you can't fix it, feature it, I suggest that you go public and you say, after you've been cured of this breast cancer, look, I got a mammogram, I got a breast exam, I was found early to have disease, and now I'm cured. And I think all women should go out and get breast cancer screening. And for years, she would come into my office and show me letters or say, I got 30 letters this month from people who followed your advice or her advice to be screened for breast cancer. The same thing happened once again, and he talked about it in news articles, et cetera, with Bob Dole, when I found his prostate cancer by doing a PSA. It was one of the early times. And he went out, not only publicized it, but put into the budget millions of dollars for PSA and prostate cancer research. And by going out and telling people, many people did get tested and their lives were saved.
Okay, with 5 minutes left, I want to briefly talk about, tell me about the job in Congress and the Supreme Court, and then tell me about the transition when you left the military and the government.
There's no way that a job in the Capitol building, where you walk into the Capitol every day and take care of some of the most influential and important individuals in the United States, cannot be absolutely thrilling, makes you feel very good, is uplifting. I walked 10 years, I worked at the Capitol, and I never walked in without thinking, what an honor, a terrific honor and experience it was. I found that the vast majority of them appreciated what I did, listened to what I did, trusted me. In many ways, I was the person that they could talk to without any political repercussions. And that was a big deal for them. They didn't have a lot of people around them who they could speak the truth to without fear that it would go public or would have repercussions politically. Without a doubt, the Supreme Court was the most intelligent, interesting group of people that I've ever met. And I didn't agree with a lot of them politically, but that wasn't my job. I didn't give out political advice.
So when do you retire from the military and the government?
January 1st, 1995 was my first day as a civilian.
Following that, you then you became the medical director for McAndrews and Forbes and the McAndrews and Forbes companies, correct?
I did.
And then you became the witch doctor.
The witch doctor. This sort of came up when I was in London, and people would say, well, go to Dr. Krasner and see him. He'll take care of things. And they'd say, okay, well, what does he do? And they would say, well, Dr. Krasner's a witch doctor. You go to see him and he tells you which doctor you need to see. And when I got to Congress and had a patient in every congressional district in the country, And I would share these patients, though they mostly came to our office for care, they sometimes went to their own districts, obviously. And it was my job to find them and the justices the best doctor in the country to take care of them. These are
And that's,
people,
and that's what you do today.
and
So-
that's what I have not a concierge practice, but a consulting practice.
You're
And
a
people are sent to me by other physicians who don't have the time or the expansive knowledge of patients that I have from my cross-country experience at Congress, my overseas experience with the State Department and with the military, to witch doctor them, find them which doctor in the world might be the best for them to see.
You're married, your wife's an attorney, you have a daughter who's an attorney, and you have a son who is in publishing, correct?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. And I'm telling you, there are few people who I've ever met who have such an interesting and varied career. And thank God that you were lieutenant in the Berry program, because otherwise you would have never been involved. And thanks for being my guest today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Michael.